Hey guys, it's me. I'm going to do a quick tutorial here using ASP.NET web forms to make a simple website. It's not going to be so much graphic heavy with CSS or any other pictures or JPEGs actually included into the website, but it's going to have the bare bones when it comes to user authentication, having a login page, having a registration page, and having the database or having the application itself connect to a MySQL database for this example. Of course, you can use Microsoft SQL Server or any other relational database, but for me, I kind of prefer MySQL. So without further ado, guys, let me go ahead and jump right in. You can download Visual Studio's Express 2012 for the web for free from Microsoft website. It'll come with a registration key because most of these downloads for Express is actually just a 30-day free trial. But if you actually have the registration key, you can enter that in, and the Express edition will be yours for free for the rest of your life. So what we're going to do here is create an empty web application, and we're going to create a new project called just web app demo, and we're going to have 3 pages that we're going to create right off the bat without doing coding. We're going to have the default page, and with web forms, the default page is the actual home page. You're going to notice they're going to all have the postfix aspx. The actual aspx file is where actually you would put the HTML content, CSS, JavaScript, or links to those files. But there's also a code behind page, the default aspx CS, where you would actually have C# code. So here's where we actually have code linking into a database to actually check the credentials. But before we get there, let's add a couple more pages. Here's the registration one, and we're going to have a logged in page. Logged in page. So what we're going to do here real quick is within the title itself, I'm just going to kind of make a little note here, or just write where we're at. Logged in page. I'm going to do this real quick for every single one, so whenever I click on each page, once I actually run this project, I'll know exactly where I'm at, because again, there's no graphics to actually tell me where I am within this project. But this simple statements will do. This is the home page. Let me do this for the registration. And we'll continue on. This is the registration page. So one more thing before I get too far into actual creating those text box, I'm going to go ahead and actually create the links. You can do that with this A tag here, and the href is basically where you would actually point, where you would actually put a little word here that's going to become visible. It's going to become a link in the actual page. So for example, from the registration page, I can have a link on the navigation portion, and the home is going to link back to the default ASPX, because the default ASPX for web forms is considered the home page. So we have that there. We're going to create a little space bar in between, and if the person clicks on this next one, I'll tell you what the pound is in a second. Registration basically is pointing back to the same page already on, and this pound basically, as soon as that person clicks on it, brings it back to the very top of the current screen. So I probably could do without that, but let me just kind of put it there for now. The default page here is also going to have the same items here, but since we're on the default page now, I can just put a pound there, and here I would actually put in the registration.aspx. So now I actually have some simple links kind of going between those two pages. I always like working release version. It's not going to have almost anything at all. So just bear with me. Here's the home page, registration. This registration page. Go back here. Okay, nothing pretty. Now let's go back here, and what we're going to do now for the default page, which for me is going to be considered the login page. What do most websites have for a login page? They have the person actually entering their username and their password. So let me go ahead and just create a username and password text box, and we're going to be using ASP.NET's text box field here. We need to create an ID because whatever we specify in this ID is how we're going to reference this text box in the actual C# code. Text. This could be blank actually, but just for demonstration purposes, I'll enter something in here. And basically that will just say to the person when this page comes up, enter your username here. So very self-explanatory. I don't even know why I actually said that out loud. So here we're going to say enter password. We're going to do the same thing as above. Create a text box. This time it's going to have the ID of password text box. Text. Enter password here. Run at server. And what we're going to do here is create an actual button click. We're going to create a button, I should say. Because as soon as the user actually enters in his username and password, he needs a way to tell the web application that I'm done. Check my credentials now. So we're going to do a submit button. Text. I'm going to call it login. I'm going to tell it run at server, and this is important because basically this code is going to be run once the application is sent to the server, and the C# code is going to be executed there. The one difference between text box and a button is that since a button is an actionable event, and text box also has actionable events as in terms of like text change within it, but for the purposes of this login page, as soon as a person clicks submit, I'm going to hook this button into a method called submit event method, and I'm going to create a method with that same name within the code behind page, and that's how we're going to link that button click to the actual code itself. So we're going to do protected void. It's going to contain the same parameter arguments as any event handler. When in doubt, just copy what's in the page load that happens to be filled in by default whenever you create a new aspx file. So there we have that for the default page. For the registration page, it's going to contain a little bit more than that, just because whenever you log into or register for a website for the first time, they'll probably ask you some personal information: first name, last name, email, phone number, your username, and your password. So it probably will take a little bit longer than I want it to be, but let me just go ahead and enter that here. Instead of using those paragraphs, I could also use the ASP.NET label field that's also available, but for some reason I forgot about that when I started, so let me just kind of continue on with what I'm doing here. And for here, the text boxes, I'm just going to have it be blank. I'm not going to enter anything there as I did in the default page. And in the interest of saving time, we're going to have to copy this. I would say like another good 5-6 times just for all of the data fields that I actually need. Let's see if I did a little bit of overkill here. Enter middle name. ID is going to be middle name. Text box. Of course, you need the last name. Not every website is going to ask all of this information, but just for this demonstration, I'm gonna do that. Okay, guys. So just bear with me. Enter phone number. Enter username and password. So I got this extra one here. I don't need this. Let me just go ahead and delete that. So go here, phone number, text box, username. Say it along, guys. You know what this one's gonna be. And just like on the default page, we're gonna create a button. As soon as the person actually fills in everything, he's going to want to register. So we're going to call this register button. That's how we're going to reference that in the code. We want the button to say register. We want people to make accounts on your website. Run that server, and again we're going to hook this into a method called register event method. Let's cap off that tag there. So again, go to the registration page here, right click, view code, and here we're going to create that method. Okay, great. So now that we got that, the website is still going to look ugly, but at least you're going to see some of the text box fields that I just created. And here within the registration page, you see the first name, middle name, last name. I don't need to read the rest of them, you guys know. And here's the username and password, and if you recall, in the text field over here, I put in enter username here, enter password here, and that's what comes up on the actual GUI itself, or on the website itself. So now that I have that done, now we're going to do a little actually create the database itself. And how we're going to do that is by using Microsoft or MySQL Workbench. I have version 5.2, but currently from the Oracle website there is a 6.1 available. This should work just as good with 6.1. So let me just go ahead and connect to MySQL Workbench. We're going to create a new schema for this web app demo, and we're going to create new tables for it too. So now that we're here, where are you? We're going to create a new connection. I'm going to call this web app demo connection string. Let's test the connection. Ask me my credentials. Everything is good. Click OK. There's my new connection string. Ask you for my credentials again. You can never be too safe. Oh, did I mistype it? There we go. So you see, here's a list of schemas I have over here. Let's create a new schema. We're going to call this web app demo. Apply. There it is. There's a schema now. Now open it up, click on tables. There's no tables in it yet because we just created the schema. We're going to add two tables. We're going to have a user registration table. And before we click apply, you do need to specify at least one column name from now. So what we're going to do is just create a user ID, type int. It's going to be the primary key. Without that, I don't think the MySQL Workbench will allow you to create it. We're going to create a new table, user address. So for example, if you're a service website where you actually mail your products, you can have a separate website here or a separate table to actually have the user's actual address. So same thing like the previous one, we need the primary key to be the user ID, apply, do it again, everything was successful, and now we have the two user tables here. But now we actually have to go in and fill the user tables with actual data. For example, if you remember the registration page, I had the first name, last name, middle name. So we're going to go ahead and do that real quick. Alright guys, now we're going to go ahead and actually create the other columns for the user registration. This is going to have all of the data that we need, that there's a text box for in the registration page, which means there's a first name, last name, middle name, and so on and so forth. So we're going to actually want to create that here. So what we're going to do here is just go to right click on the actual user registration table, alter table, and we're going to go ahead and start creating those extra columns. username. What I'm going to do here, which is a big no-no, is actually store the password in plain text just for demonstration purposes, but I'm going to also have assault and assaulted password, and this is important for security later on, but that's going to be discussed later on in this video. So let me just go ahead and apply, changes were added. So now if you go to user registration, you'll see all of this data here that's going to be passed in from the actual registration of a user on your website. So going back to the actual project over here, what you're going to actually have to do is add a reference to the MySQL.Data DLL. By default, your system does not have that, but if you go to the Oracle website, you can download the MySQL connector, I believe it's called. And once you actually have it downloaded and installed, you can go to the reference over here in the project, add a reference, go to extensions, and you'll see MySQL.Data DLL. This one's version 4.0. As you can see at the first line near the end, this one is version 2.0. Let's just grab the latest. Now we have the DLL reference in our project. Now what we want to do is actually create a new user within the MySQL workbench just to kind of work specifically for this web application, and I'm going to show you how to do that real quick. If you actually go to your MySQL folder over here, go to server, you're going to see two command line I guess what do you call it, options over here. You can select either one. It's going to select Unicode. It's going to ask for your password, your default one that you had. Not default one I should say, but the one it first asks you for when you install the MySQL workbench. And here's where you're going to actually create a new password for your, or a new user into your MySQL. And just to show you guys the actual creation of one, if you actually type in select user host from MySQL.user, these are just test user profiles that I actually have here, and we're going to go ahead and create a brand new one for this project. But I don't have everything memorized, so I actually have this separate note here, separate file, separate project I should say, with the syntax and actually how to create a new account into MySQL. And it's these two lines over here. So what we're going to do here is just kind of replicate it, but we're going to create a new user and a new password for this person. So you can go ahead and follow along. Grant all privileges on, and here's where we're going to actually create the new username. So here we're going to create what do we have, a web app demo that I'm using, web app demo user. Actually, you know what, I think there's a character limit on this. I remember running across it before, so let's just say, let's just call it web user just to save time. And then we're going to finish it off with identified by, and here's where the password is going to be with grant option. So when I actually create this, and we're just going to call it web user 2014. Okay, so you see that it's been accepted. If I actually run this, select user host from MySQL user, you'll see now at the very bottom there's a web user right there. So just for this demonstration, I'm actually going to just jot it down, but obviously whenever you have your own application, this is a big no-no to actually jot it down. So let's go here, and the username is, or oh gosh, I can't believe I already forgot. Web user password is web user 2014. So this is going to become important later on when we actually create the connection string into the Web.Config file, because that's where we're going to actually create the connection string to tie it to this user of MySQL workbench to be able to write and connect to databases within the MySQL workbench. So if we actually go ahead and go to the web.config file before we continue any more coding, here we're going to actually run, or I should say set the connection string. So within your configuration brackets, we're going to have connection strings, and here we're going to add a few more items. Add name, we'll fill that in later or after this. Provider name. So this is the name of the connection string that we're going to use later on. Web app con string. And here we're going to reference a method within the DLL. We're going to reference the MySQL.Data.MySQL client. And just realize this is lowercase. So now here we're going to actually reference the server, the user ID, password, and the database. So the server itself is just your host machine. So when you downloaded the MySQL Workbench, you actually have it installed on your own machine. The user ID is the user that we just created using the Unicode command prompt for MySQL. It's going to be web user. Password is going to be the password we created. And just for informational purposes, again, this is not good the way it's actually stored here in plain text. You want to encrypt it. I know there's IIS server technique to actually encrypt your web.config file and actually be able to decrypt it to actually read the data. But just for this demonstration, we're going to just show it like this. And the database is, here we go, the web app demo. That's what we're going to connect it to. Okay guys, I think pretty much up to this point we have all of the groundwork ready to go for the actual application to start accepting user input and writing the code now to actually connect to the MySQL database. So I'll get to that in just a second. Okay guys, now we can actually start coding some C# here, but actually I just recalled, before I get into that, one of the things I actually want to do with my registrations table here is to go to alter table. I think I had it up already, but if you actually look over here to user ID, you'll see several columns here, and the one thing I want you to actually do is, if you actually look at AI auto incremental, if you actually give or check that box off and apply it, this is going to help later, because the code I'm going to show you right now to write to the database, I'm not going to actually increment the user ID, and since this is a primary key, when I try to write the code without incrementing that in my code, every single person I try to insert into this table is going to have the same user ID, and since it's primary key, it's going to cause the application to throw an exception, give an error, crash. I'm not sure which one of those three actually happens, but I'm pretty sure it actually causes the program to fail. So I just want you guys to make note of that. And having this checked off, I think we're good to go back into the web app demo. So what we're going to do over here in the registration code, we're going to create 3 member variables, all of them related to connecting to the MySQL database. We're going to create the MySQL connection. We're going to call it con. We're going to do the same thing for MySQL data, MySQL client, MySQL command. And hold on, wrong one. Command. The connection is going to actually contain the connection string to connect to the database. The command is going to contain the connection with its instantiation, and also it's going to connect, or going to have the query string parameter as part of its initialization. And what we're going to have over here is just going to be a query string. And what we're going to do here is, instead of actually writing the code within the register event method, which actually gets started by clicking on the register button on the registration page, I'm just going to go ahead and create a new member variable or new member method, register user. So what we're going to do is just kind of copy that, paste it into there, and what we're going to do first is actually get a reference to the connection string that is in the Web.Config file. And to do that, ASP.NET has this fantastic library here where you actually can call by connection name of the string and have the actual connection string parameters passed in through here. So the connection string here is going to be the name that we added here. So what we're going to do is copy this, put it inside there, and what this line of code is going to do is going to get the actual connection string and store it into the con string member variable, a local variable here. So it's going to grab this data here, which we have the credentials for the person to actually access the MySQL database, and it's going to return it to the connection string over here. So what we're going to do now is create or initialize the con variable. We're going to pass in the connection string. We're also going to initialize the query string. I'm going to just leave it blank for now, and we're going to initialize the command. And this takes two parameters, the query string and the con. Later on below, we're going to actually execute this. That's going to actually write to the database, and we're going to go ahead and here we're going to actually go ahead and close the connection to the database. And before I forget, got to open it over here, and I just noticed a little typo. Since we're initializing it, I forgot the new keyword. That should take care of that error, and same thing here, and we're good. So now we're actually going to form the query string. It's going to look maybe slightly complicated, but it won't be too bad. And what we're going to do here is insert into, and we're going to tell it, specify the database we're going to write this query to, and we're going to write to the web app demo database and specify the actual table we want to actually write into. So if you recall, here in the workbench we have the web app demo database and we have the user registration table. So this is the syntax here to actually specify which table you want to write to. And what we're going to specify within these parentheses is actually the list of columns that we actually want to write to within the code itself. And if you recall, here there's a bunch of columns here. Not all of them I'm going to fill right away. For example, the salted password and user ID I'm going to fill in. So you got to specify exactly in order the columns you're going to actually use. So we go back to the code, and here I'm going to be writing out the column names I want to enter. Username and password. I'm going to continue the string onto the next line, and we're going to specify the values. So just FYI, everything is going to be set in as a string, and the syntax to do it here is after this values parentheses, opening parentheses, every single variable we're putting in is going to be surrounded by quotes, or I should say a tick or a single quote, and that's why I have this apostrophe here. So what we're going to do is actually get the text box text field, and we've got to close it with a single quote. So values quote, single quote, name quote. And now we're going to be actually entering the value for the middle name, so we got to put comma there, and it's going to be another quote or another tick mark, and we're going to do this on and on till the end. We're going to close that off, comma for the next variable, then a starting quote, starting tick, just bear with me guys while I finish this off. I'm going to add username and password. Since this is the last one, I only need to write one more tick before the actual close parentheses, close off the double quotes for that, and this is the actual query string that's going to be used to write into the MySQL database. FYI, I'm going to show you guys later on the correct way to actually write to the database, because I'm going to use this type of string structure for logging in, but you'll see later on how this is actually vulnerable to SQL injection attacks, because I don't do any input validation. I'm just kind of passing in the user's input as is. But just for demonstrational purposes, this is basically what you would need to do to actually write to the MySQL database. So now if we actually rebuild, we run it, we're going to be back here to the registration page. And so let's start just adding somebody. Roger, Andy, Anderson, Roger at Gmail. As you guys can see, I already typed it in beforehand, just kind of playing around. Phone number is going to be 789-456-1230. Username is just going to be Roger, and the password is going to be Roger123 or 321. Now before I click register, you're going to see over here, this is going to be inserted into the user registration table, and right now there is nothing. So right now I'm going to click register. Right now I don't have the code to actually respond saying you've successfully created a page, but if we go back to the MySQL database and we select everything again, you're going to see the user's information over there. Of course, I didn't enter in the salt or the salted password. If you remember the user ID, I have it auto incremental, so that filled it in by itself. But let's go ahead and actually add another user. Jesse John Johnson. JJJ, how about that? Jesse at Yahoo. It's gonna have another number. Jesse John. And password's gonna be Johnson1. How about that? So I'm gonna click register again. We go back to the database. You don't see it there, but if we actually select it again, you'll see the person's inputs actually inserted into the database. And FYI, also, you never want to store the password in clear text as I have over here. I'll show later on in the video the proper way to actually store it, but hackers can steal this database or any database out there that doesn't have protection. And if it's actually in clear text, pretty much the hacker will have all the password to actually log in and potentially wreak havoc on that person. So, but just for now, that's actually how you do it. And pretty much we're done here with the registration page. So right now I'll just stop this application and go on to the default page and actually handle the user login credentials. Okay, so now that we actually have that done, let's go over to the default page and handle the user login credentials. But to do that, we're going to actually copy some of these member variables here, because it's going to be pretty similar. So let's just kind of paste those up here. We're going to add another one, member variable name, and we're going to add another MySQL member variable as well. And this is going to actually read in the data from the actual MySQL command, because last time we were just writing to the database. We didn't need to actually read anything from it, because we were saying insert into the database. This time we're going to actually get from the database. So just like last time, we're also going to get the connection string from the Web.Config file. Connection strings to string. Keep forgetting what the actual connection string is. So connection string here is web app connection string or con string. Just paste it in here. What this line does is actually retrieve the connection string and stores it into the local variable con string. And the connection string is actually the server address, user credentials that we created a little bit earlier, and the database we want to actually connect to. So we go here, and we're going to actually want to also initialize the member variables for con and command. So we're going to go ahead and do that. New MySQL. We're going to pass it in the con string to actually connect. We're going to go ahead and open the database or open a connection. Later on, we're going to close it. We're going to actually create the query string. For now, it's going to be blank. And we're going to also instantiate the command parameter. And it's going to take the query string and the con as inputs. The good thing about the reader is that you don't actually have to instantiate it. You can just actually have it equals to the execute reader here. This will return the query response from MySQL and store it into the reader. So before we continue on now, let's actually input the query string. So last time we were actually inserting into the database. This time it's going to be different. This time we actually want the user, if he's authenticated, to grab everything about his information so he can actually log in with his already created account. So we do that by saying select star, which basically means grab everything from, and here you would specify the database and the actual table you want to grab from, user registration table, parentheses. And just so you guys remember, here's the table or the database web app demo and user registration. Here it has the user credentials, username and password. And here we're going to formulate I'm sorry, we don't need these parentheses here. So grab everything from web app demo where the username, which is the same name as the column within the MySQL database, equals the user's inputted username. And just like in the registration thing, we're going to do that within ticks, single quotes, and password equals. So if both things match within the database, then this will return actual values to the application here. So let's just kind of make it to fit on one page. Go there. And we're going to have the reader execute or read in the executed command. Let's just initialize name to empty string. And while reader has rows and reader reads, I'm going to go ahead and actually this is going to grab all of those column attributes from the MySQL bench or MySQL database and return it to the reader. And here we're going to actually have name equal reader get string, reader get ordinal, and we're going to specify first name here. So that will return the first name to the name variable here. And actually, what I would like to do, how about we get the full name? So let's get the middle name and the last name. So we're going to do that simply by copying and pasting and renaming the get ordinal attribute here, and this will return first, middle, and last name to the name member variable. So now afterwards what we're going to do, if reader has rows, perform the following. If it doesn't have any rows, then that means the person entered in credentials that do not exist in the database. So here we're just going to actually update the text box field to just to say invalid user, invalid credentials, whichever way you actually want to specify to the actual user. If the user does exist, we're going to want to do a couple of things. First, we're going to actually use this session to actually store in the web application server space the name here. And this is one of several ways you can actually pass in information from one page to another, because unlike a typical application where you can instantiate a new class with variables, and here you don't actually instantiate a new class or I should say instantiate a new web page. You actually call to redirect to that new web page. So here we're going to do response.buffered output equals false, or true, I'm sorry. And here's where we're going to actually redirect. So this first attribute is going to be the location of the page you actually want to go to. So we actually want to go to the logged in page, so just specify it. And the second attribute here is a boolean, where you can specify to true, which would indicate to terminate, I think, this web page or the other web page a little bit early. And from what I understand, that's actually not something you want to do. So by default, if you set it to false, that's the safe thing to actually do. So don't worry about setting it to true, just leave it as is. After this else, we're going to go ahead and close the reader. So now we actually have everything we need to go to the logged in page. So why don't we go to the logged in page? I want it to actually specify to the user its own name if he actually has the right credentials. So we're going to go here and say hello, and I'm going to create a new ASP.NET graphic object. And here's where we're going to actually put in the user's name if he actually is authenticated. So let's go here, put text, no user, and I could leave that as empty. That's really not important. And of course, it has to be run at the server. So now, if we go into the logged in page, CSS code, let's make another variable here, string name, just like the previous application or the previous aspx web file. And here we're going to extract from the session what we stored from the previous page. So here's actually how we share data, but we're going to actually have to cast this to a string. So we passed it in a string, so let's make sure we cast it as a string. And we're going to reference that or store that into the label that we just created. User label text equals name. So now it's going to read in, if the person is authenticated, it's going to say hello, and it's going to print out the actual user's name. So now that we actually done that, we can actually test it out. Okay guys, so let's actually go ahead and try this out. Run it. What we're going to do here is let's just type in somebody who doesn't exist on the actual database itself. And if you recall here, there's only Roger and Jesse that are available, but let's just enter in somebody who doesn't exist and let's see what happens. Login, invalid user. If you remember, I actually have the if else. If the actual query return has no data in it, it is obviously somebody who doesn't exist. So how about if we actually try somebody who does exist? Let's try Roger here. Roger, his username and password is Roger321. So let's go ahead here, Roger 3, 2, and 1. Oh, sorry guys, I did a typo here. You see the exception? What it's complaining about is it can't find this character, it can't find this column, and the reason why is because I spelled last with 2 T's, and in the database is just 1. So that's what happened there. So excuse me for the hiccup. And let me go ahead and do this again. Let's run this. Okay. So Roger 321, logged in page, hello Roger Andy Anderson. That's exactly what his name is. So that's perfect, guys. So how about we just go ahead and close that, then we'll actually try with another person. Oh, don't want that one there. So let's just stop that. Typically you would just have a logout button that I'll show later on, but for now, if you just don't want to stop and restart, just stop the application and run it again. And the other person that's here is Jesse. Username is Jesse John, last name Johnson 1. So let's do Jesse John Johnson 1. Hello, Jesse John Johnson. Awesome, guys. So now we're able to actually log into the database using what we've coded up. So just for demonstration purposes, once again, let's just try to log in as somebody who doesn't exist. So let's just put Taylor Vince. What the hell? Doesn't exist. Alright guys, so I hope that was actually informational. I will be expanding on this just to show how to actually do it better in terms of security practices on checking input, user input validation, and making sure things are not trying to hack into your website using your SQL strings. So thank you guys. If you have any questions, let me know.